Oh boy. And it continues. We're doing it. Yeah, I took a nap. And I woke up and I was like, wait a minute. I've only just laid down. What do you mean 2 hours have passed? But then I had a good sandwich. A real good burger. And I'm feeling up to going a little more tonight. More! We'll see if we can't get the whole thing done. Hopefully we can. Oh my gosh. We have an anonymous draft, an anonymous python, an anonymous... My goodness. What are all these? Is it just the same two people being assigned random animals each time they clicked on one? Who knows? But, maybe it's just bots. Hey, you're back! Yeah. Thanks for the link you sent on Discord. I've got an external hard drive that I may be revving up sometime when I have a moment. I stick all kinds of stuff on it. Alright, but we are doing episode 2 now. Oh boy. So episode 2 tended to be slightly longer than Ep 1. Anyway, we're gonna just get started with it. I think we're mostly gonna end up pulling from the third draft. I made some rather drastic changes in that draft, and I've been trying to decide if I want to keep them or not. Yeah. I left mine working on, processing a bunch of clumps. Alright, let's see. So, in the first two drafts, they follow basically, he comes in, they talk a little bit, and then they together fight the first guy. And they manage to just get away from him. In the third draft, she gets attacked alone. All alone by herself, and manages to kill the guy by herself. Now, that's a fairly dramatic change, and I can't decide which way is better. On the one hand, I really like the fight itself. Using the cursed cursed stuff, tricking him. She's being very, very clever and just amazing. I like the fight itself, but on the other hand, I kind of think it might be better. I think it might be better to stick with they barely get away. That they're not really fighters. You know? So I'm not sure which to go with. Tier 8 machines? Most of my machines haven't gotten anywhere near Tier 8. I think I don't even know what my boiler is. Tier 2, maybe? Something awful. I've been trying to decide which one I should go with for a while, and I guess I'll just keep the awesome fight scene. Yeah, okay, I guess we're gonna go with it for now. And for now, I mean probably forever. This is probably just gonna be the scene now. This means there won't be a lot I can take from the earlier drafts for this first sequence, but we'll go over them anyway. Alright, let's just grab this. Up until they leave the first room. God, because it's so different. In the first two drafts, we went with, she didn't even get the beads until further in. And then they had their conversation in the rope room. Like, the whole rope room conversation is gone now, because everything that was done there happens up front. It's all front-loaded after that battle. You can ignore the boiler. You can let the boiler fall behind. And the cutter, the only thing it does is make screws, and it makes them 4 at a time and quickly. So the cutter can be ignored safely as well. Anyway, oh god. This might be a little bit complicated to assemble this one. If we're going to go with a third draft, I think I'm going to take a completely different strategy this time. Because yeah, even the order of events happens differently. It's hard to write out the scenes the way we did for the last one. I'm just going to literally grab Control A, Control C. I'm literally just going to grab the entire thing and dump the entire third draft in here. That's 10 pages. And then we're going to look at just drafts 1 and 2 and see what we can pick out from those to put into here. I don't even remember using it for the gem producer. No, you're right, I did. But I have like a tier 2 boiler and I had no problem making the gem producer. Regardless. Alright, so we're just going to kind of go along. So I can just close that draft entirely out. And we'll just take these two and just grab shit that we like and stuff it over here. Alright, so in this one, she's just ignoring the curse that's swirling around and trying to grasp her heart and kill her, because it has no power over her. And this one, she also is ignoring the curse trying to grab her, but it's a little bit different. And this one, the curse doesn't have a physical form. So, So I guess, oh dear. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the problem. The ink ran out again. Portals was sure something was wrong with her pen. It didn't seem to hold as much ink as when she'd started. She leaned back and examined the cramped script on the page. She rolled the pen with her tongue, pushing it to the side of her mouth while she contemplated her work. It was written in a cipher. She had no idea what any of it meant, which was part of the reason the curse couldn't touch her for copying it. But this also meant she had to take extra care that every single character was copied correctly. When she was satisfied with this page, she bent forward and moved the end of the pen back to the center of her mouth, then carefully dipped the other end in the inkwell to let it draw the ink in. She then resumed painstakingly copying the document one character at a time. Okay. The second draft. Once again the curse, like a black mist, rose from the papers. Portals was copying and tried to find her. She ignored it while painstakingly copying the next line one character at a time. The curse, unable to find a target, settled back into the paper. She leaned back and absently rolled the pen with her tongue while she double-checked her work. She couldn't read any of it. It was in a cipher, one which added odd marks to letters seemingly at random. So she had to be meticulous in making sure each character was copied exactly. When she was satisfied she'd copied the page perfectly, she waited for it to dry. Okay, anyway, that's the whole scene again. So that brings us to this one. Rose ignored the curse as it bubbled from the document she was copying. The dark mist swirled around her, grasping for her heart. I kind of like this way of it better. So we'll steal that opening line. Bubbled up. I do like that though. Oh, wrong way. She leaned back and then double and triple checked her work against the original. She couldn't read the cipher, and it added odd marks to the characters at seemingly random intervals, so this diligence was necessary. The curse continued hunting for a target, forming a claw and grasping at the empty air. It got between her and her work, interfering with her ability to see. She rolled the pen to the corner of her mouth. "Give it up already." The curse continued its mindless probings. "Haven't you run out of warmth yet?" As if on cue, the curse began to disperse. Portal sighed and rolled the pen back to the center of her mouth, then leaned forward and made a small correction to her work. Okay. Because the fight happens further down on these. Ooh, I don't know. Well, let's read the draft we're going with and then check it against the others. There was a distant scream. She stopped to listen. So once again, I'm using the name more often than I need to. There's only one character present. She stopped to listen. More screams. They sounded like they were coming from upstairs. She placed her pen on the table, careful that it couldn't fall off the edge. Let me see how she placed the pen on the table in the other drafts. Bent all the way over and put the pen on the low table. She bent all the way over and put the pen down on the low table, careful that it couldn't fall off the edge. Boop boop. Shouts, cries, and the crash of wood being smashed. Her eyes darted around the empty storeroom that served as her office. A few brooms in one corner and some empty shelves. And of course the table and her own belongings. No place to hide. Another crash, then another. They were coming down the hall in her direction. She inhaled sharply. Oh, looks like we're losing the italicized again. Doors! Her gaze turned to the light wooden door. Someone's kicking in the doors. Even as she thought it, she heard another door across the hall give way. She gathered all the warmth she could. It wasn't much. "I need the beads." They were in a fire newt bladder hanging from her neck. With her teeth, she found the cord and began jerking it up to where she could. Okay, so let's see. Focused her whole attention on the sounds. Let's include that. I like that. And focused her whole attention on the sounds. Okay, here she is hearing the footsteps. Door bursts open. Where is that fight? Must have been very quick. Alright, here it is. Somewhere I went from calling him Pine to Pines. But his name is correctly Pine. I should fix that. I would like find and replace, please. Replace all. I didn't ask for you. Go away. Okay, that should clear that up. Okay. She leaned full over, set the pen on the table, and started to glance around the room. Her office was little more than an empty supply closet. There was nothing but some empty shelving, a few brooms in the corner, the table she was working on, in her basket. She began pulling her body heat together in case she needed to use it. Alright, there we go. She's ready to fling magic. Alright, I guess we're gonna roll on. The door split down the middle, part of it tumbled into the room. It broke her skin, but did no real damage. Her muscles and bones had received maximum enhancement. I'm going to go ahead and just throw that detail in as a child. Just so nobody's confused and thinks that she's casting a buff on herself in the moment. Her muscle and bone had received maximum enhancement as a child. The other half of the door, for all the automatic corrections it does, you'd think it would be able to invert the H and T on the. It's such a common typo. Or maybe it's not a common typo. Maybe it's just my fingers being stupid. Broke her skin, but did no real damage. Her muscle and bone had received max. Child. It kind of feels a little awkward to have this here. But could do no real damage. I feel it's a little awkward being there, but I also feel like it kind of has to be. Because during this sequence, she gets smacked around pretty hard into the floor repeatedly and suffers essentially no ill effects. Because, you know, she's got maximized bone density and muscle density. She's freaking tough. And heavy. That tends to go hand in hand in my stories. Whenever a character is very durable, they tend to also be heavy. And depending, they often can't swim so good either, if at all. If you want to be inhumanly durable, there's always a cost. They use the word maximized for just the most that they can safely do. Well, by a certain definition of safely. You could actually increase muscle density to the point where muscles don't work anymore. You can do a lot of things. But, it's the limit of what is workable. I don't know why I'm saying that out loud. We're not supposed to give away details like that. If it's not in the text, you're not supposed to know. Anyway, we have the door hung by a single remaining hinge from the doorway. The man's face peered into the room. He had no birthmark. Forehead was unmarked. So he had no birthright, no magic. His forehead was unmarked. Whoa. So, he had no birthright, no magic. Okay, there we go. The man had heightened stature. He had to duck his head to enter the doorway. He had enlarged eyes that bulged from the sockets. His chest and arms rippled with added muscles that his body hadn't had time to properly absorb. And he was holding a Titan spear. Ah, an easy one. His voice was shockingly conversational. The man stepped casually into the room and drew the spear back to run portals through. She threw all the warmth in her body into a lance of light and blasted the man in those huge eyes. The man screamed and staggered back, protecting his eyes with one hand. Portals couldn't have created more light if she tried. Her whole body was racked with chills and she was shuddering. She needed to get the beads. Frantically, she bit down on the cord. She bit right through it. The pouch fell to the floor. She dove to get it in her mouth, but the man effortlessly pulled it away from her with one hand. "Well, well, I should have recognized your birthmark," he said, rubbing his left eye. "For some reason, I thought you were from Doveflight. But that eccentric guardian you got draws all sorts of things, doesn't he?" Portal sat up. Her blonde hair was in her face. She tried to put together another lance of light, but only managed a few small sparks. Gotta watch out. When it's doing this autocorrect bullshit, it'll actually turn words into other words when you misspell them. Actually, I got so fed up with autocorrect on my phone, I turned it off. Because I would very intentionally type a word, and it would change it into a different word. And I'd go, delete, 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 type in the word I intended, and it would change it into the word I didn't want. Oh, that way it made me mad. Not having autocorrect is also a little annoying because of how small the buttons are, but they go too far. The man opened the pouch and let the beads fall into his hand. "Only 3? Pity." He tossed the empty pouch. "I better find someone who isn't poor today." He glanced away from her to drop the beads into his own money pouch. Okay, I need to add a detail of clothing. Haha, so I'm not the only one to kill that feature. Let me see. Alright. Doggone mosquitoes buzzing around the room. I'll get you on your next pass. Portal seized the moment. Yeah, he looked away, so she seized the moment to go for the documents. Oh, no, you don't. The man seized her by her long hair and hauled her into the air. She managed to get the entire page into her mouth before he could see. Nah. Better written like this. He squeezed the sides of her jaw, forcing her mouth open. What the? She spat the paper into his hand. The curse bubbled out of the paper. It immediately found a valid target. His eyes bulged so much it seemed they would pop out. The curse found his heart. squeezed. He dropped portals and swatted the wad of paper away. The curse slackened its grip and began to release him. Portals lifted another page from the pile with her teeth. Hey, look what I got! Let's see. Yeah, we're gonna... Couldn't read the cipher. I know this won't work in the magic system. I know this won't work. This particular bit of it. So we're going to cut this particular bit of the fight away. Before the curse had time to relent, she had crawled the distance and pressed the cursed document against the man's bare leg. She then bit through the document into his calf, holding it against him. This document in the pile held the same curse. To protect it from unauthorized persons. This document in the pile held the same curse to protect it from unauthorized persons. Touching or reading it. He kicked and slammed her into the floor hard enough to crack a floorboard. He slammed her into the ground again and again, each time with less force. He tried to grab her and push her away, but his strength quickly drained as the curse pulled all the heat from his core. The man stilled. Blood was running into her eyes, and her heart was beating in her ears. But she continued to keep her teeth clamped tightly on the man, even well after the curse had dispersed. Okay. That through is the entire fight. There's really nothing like it in these two. The battle is so different. I think we'll just keep rolling with this version and see. She let go portals. She let the man go and turned to see the new person who entered the room. It was Pine. Oh my gosh, I said copy and replace Pines with Pine, and it turned his name into the letter P all the way down? We'll just have to correct this all the way down. He was wearing a full hazard suit, every inch of his body covered in wax cloth and leather, all black, with a full mask and a pair of smokestone goggles. But she didn't need to see his face to recognize the man. He took a second. He took in the scene and seemed to understand what happened. He ran over and lifted her off the ground, placing her on the table. You're bleeding. Are you gonna be all right? It's just blood. She couldn't see herself, but was sure she must look awful. There were still screams, and now the sound of breaking glass coming from inside the facility. He undid several straps and pulled off his mask. He was sucking in deep breaths. The masks had not been meant for physical exertion, and he had clearly been running. His face was so red that his pale birthmark, a leaning pine tree, stood out like a light sphere in the blackness. That his. There's the problem. What's happening out there? Her voice quavered, betraying her fear. How many are there? He wiped her face with a small white cloth. Gulgate is dead. He was offering them money and they just... He pulled the cloth back. It was red. It took him a moment to find words again. I don't know. Lots? They're running around, taking whatever they please and breaking everything else. Who are they? She took another look at the man. Are they all unmarked? I think so. Pine began grabbing her belongings and packing them away in the side pockets of her basket. Heartfeather took most of the others with her to the breeding chamber. She wants to release the manticores. So, small correction between drafts. Okay. I now know who Heartfeather is. Portals was still shivering from her use of magic. Or perhaps the fear and revulsion had something to do with it. The manticores? But they're still kittens. They won't be of any use fighting off. They aren't planning to use them in a fight. In his haste to pack her things, he spilled her inkwell and groaned. They're planning to take as many of them as they can and run. He hissed and dropped something. Portals turned and saw that in his haste to collect her things, he'd accidentally picked up one of the cursed documents. It released him, and he didn't touch the thing again. Instead, he gathered up the copies she had made and folded them twice, then tucked them away. Alright, and we're gonna look at the other two drafts and see if we can snag anything good from them. Okay. In a moment, she took stock of her options. It was a small room. The nearest hiding place was in the corner of the room behind the shelf, but it would take her far too long to get to it. She was warm. That meant she could use some of her magic. Her beads were tucked away inside a pouch at her neck. Blah, blah, blah. There's a man wearing a hazard suit. The waxcloth and black leather glistened wetly. Even though his face was hidden, she recognized Pine. The door opened. She could now hear the combat more clearly. Though still it was distant. She could hear someone sobbing in pain, the sobs cut off with a wet gurgle. Here's one thing to steal. We're gonna slip that in here. Okay, there we go. What else can we pilfer from my earlier drafts? Okay, shut the door, tore off his mask, gasping for air. Okay. They killed Gulgate. He stifled a sob and looked like he might retch up his breakfast. They killed him. They just... Takes it a little better in the current draft. Or is better at repressing what he just saw, perhaps. Got to leave. They're the unmarked. They had already killed the guards and gotten in before. Okay, that's when he touches the papers. The curse swirled around his fingers as a black mist for a moment before settling back into his body. Yeah. He has a component of the curse in him, by the way. You have to agree to it if you're going to be employed as a researcher. Isn't that great? Because the number one people who are going to steal your research are your own employees. Okay, left the originals. Pack up the copies. Someone shouted something in the hall. Hey, Blaze, how's it going? There was a reply in an unfamiliar language. She was bursting with questions, but dared not delay him by asking. Okay, that brings us to more or less the same spot as we were here, so let's look at the third draft. Another loud bang. There were footsteps running down the hall outside towards her. She tensed, motes of light forming like sparks in front of her. Like that, as she was prepared, a key was inserted in the lock. She relaxed. We also don't get to have the key ever again because they kick in the door. Cool. Yeah. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure you're ready for whatever craziness may come this year. This year could well be more interesting than 2020 was. And that's not a good thing. So. Yeah, I saw your email. You had beaten some kind of super boss. She didn't need to see his face to recognize Pine. Oh, see, this is where that plural kicked in. I don't know why. I don't know why I started calling him Pines instead of Pine. But it's definitely singular. Okay. Cool be unpacking her things in the pockets on the sides of her bamboo wickerwork basket. When he touched the documents, the curse found him and immediately struck his chest with a claw of dark mist, grasping for his heart. His a yelp. I think this might not be the right word here. With a yelp, he dropped the I'm still making little changes to the first, second, and third draft. It's like I've settled absolutely into the fourth draft here, and I'm still tinkering with the first three because I can't help myself. With a yelp, he dropped the papers and stepped back. The curse released him and sat, clutching his chest for a long moment. The sounds outside continued, now with the added percussion of shattering glass. I like that. Let's see if we can... Where did shattered glass first get mentioned? Now with the added percussion of shattering glass coming from inside the facility. A time limit? Well, if you say it's hard, and I know you've beaten Genius of Sephiros, it must have been hard as hell. Okay. Fine, resumed packing. He left the original documents, but had no problem to take the copies she'd made. And then, okay, we're up to the hazard suit in all 3 drafts. Alright, the hazard suit. We're going to end up going back and forth a lot, up and down a lot, just because the order changed so much between drafts. He drew her hazard suit out of the basket. It was wide and stout, meant for a laborer's body, like hers. The arms and legs had been tied off, of course, as they'd only get in the way. Could you get his bead pouch first? Pine paused. Oh! He glanced at her, then seemed to notice her discarded couch on the floor. Oh, yes, of course. I used a lot of warmth, she said. He came over and drew one of the beads from the pouch and placed it in her mouth. She swallowed it immediately and felt relief as the heat spread through her body. Give me a couple more, she asked before he could tuck it away. Pine drew out 2 more and placed them in her mouth. They were warm and became even warmer in reaction to her saliva. She tucked them into a cheek. What's the plan? He wasted no time and was already helping her into her hazard suit. We're going to grab a rope and get to the roof. It's the only exit I can be certain they aren't guarding. Spider in 4 hours. Oh. I watch it with Snyder. We look forward every week to seeing it. I'll have to watch it later when he's over and able to watch it with me. Chrono Trigger is so good. Did you play... I found that ROM hack that was sort of a sequel. It's not as good as the original, but it's still good. It's still fun. It's, you know, it's Chrono Trigger ROM hack. It's good. I can't think of the name of it. Like Echoes of Flame or something. I don't remember. Guarding? She asked. I can take the asked right out. Then she noticed he was pouring water into her mask. It wouldn't seal properly unless it was wet. Wait, no, I can't wear that. The smoke stone eats too much of my light. Pine's voice was iron. You have to. The miasma will kill us if we don't. Will kill you. If you don't. Portal shook her head. No, it's fine. I'll just get sick, but I need to. Not dead. Sick. Dead. He knelt and met her eyes. Any other time it wouldn't be so bad, but they're breaking all the tanks. The water of life is everywhere. There must be so much miasma out there. Now, I decided I was going to rename this. This was just a placeholder name, but shit, what are we going to name that goo that's in the tanks? Oh. Embryonic fluid? No. We can keep the placeholder name. As I've said before, there's no fix so permanent as a temporary fix. Watch as I fail to rename this in all drafts, and that just becomes what the goo is called. There's something wrong with calling it water when it's so incredibly thick and heavy. But she looked at the bare head of the man she'd killed. They'll all be dead in a few days. Not that that'll do us much good. He pulled the mask over her head and tightened it in place. Okay, I'm going to make a addition. back to the man when he entered, he was actually bald. And I didn't mention that. Breathable liquid. Heh. Oh, they won't have words like carbon. They won't have fluoride or anything like that figured out. I mean, their alchemists are great, but and they this is kind of the funny thing. When you read stuff in the past, the scientists of the day used a lot different language than the common people, and it's kind of a strange balance when you're creating fantasy, because people might your audience might expect them to all speak like they're medieval, but you know, this is a conversation I should have another time. Anyway, I'm making sure I include this fur because anybody who gets, there's a thing you can do where you get fur. Unfortunately, if you're, well, I mean, unless you're able to afford the expensive stuff, the fur is one of the few that's easy enough to remove, but you sort of end up bald if you have it removed. So it's I know it's a completely incomprehensible detail with the information you have at this point in the story, but if I do decide to continue on with this, I have to keep track of all those little details so that somebody, you know, could go back and be like, oh yeah, no, that detail was there from the beginning. Like all kinds of little obnoxious details. Yeah. Yeah. They'll have somewhat scientific terminology, especially relating to their own magic, but they don't get to have knowledge that they have no reason to have. There, I guess that's a simple way to put it. Damn, you're making me want to watch this. Just knowing that the spider is gonna have an episode drop. Because I'll still be awake. But no. No. Oh, I have stuff. Actually, I went through yesterday and I reduced the pages of notes. I've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages and 1 note card left. I got rid of all the others. So I've actually boiled my notes down. I used to use a bunch of X's as placeholders a lot for things I needed to name later. Alright, let's see. They'll all be dead in a few days. Not that that'll do us much good. He pulled the mask over her head and tightened it in place. It was hard to breathe, and the goggles restricted her vision. It also made the rooms appear significantly darker. Why would they? Why would they want to steal from us if they're just gonna die? Her voice was muffled even to her own ears. They must not know. He was cinching his own mask in place. Though they knew Gullgate on sight. He lifted Portals and placed her into her basket. It was wickerwork bamboo, and had a wool blanket folded on the bottom. So, he continued his thought while securing the straps over his shoulders, whoever sent them didn't tell them on purpose. Purposefully. Make the sentence a little bit clearer. Purposefully didn't tell them. You'd think they'd figure it out on their own after seeing everyone here wearing these. She shifted the beads to her other cheek and created a tiny amount of light to bleed off some of the heat. Well, if you want to try and sit down and have a discussion with them. He moved to the broken door. No thanks. Portals felt the difference in his stride. He moved so easily normally, but with carrying her, he couldn't move nearly as gracefully, or more importantly, as quickly. Maximum density bones and muscles. They had rarely been an asset in her life. Rather, they were almost always a liability. Okay. I like that line. Let's scroll up to where she got hit with the door. Where's that door kicked in her face? Okay. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Alright, now, whoops, we're out of the room. So we're going to check the, until they get out of the room on the other two drafts and see if there's anything to pilfer from them again. In moments, he'd packed what little they had away and drew out her hazard suit. It was broader around the shoulders than his, and the arms, and had the arms and legs tied off so as not to get in the way. He helped her into it and, after pouring water into the mask, it wouldn't work when dry, he placed it over her head. Okay, yeah. She bit her lip. She was heavy. He'd never be able to run from anyone while carrying her. I think that's understood in what we wrote. As she settled on his back, she asked, "What's the plan?" Heartfeather insisted on trying to wake the manticores, and most of the others followed. What the hell is Heartfeather? This is better. This is better. The only detail we lose is breeding chamber. And look at that. It's back just like that. Perfect. All right, let's see. They're mature. They can't fight. Okay, here's a detail that's been missing. You said they won't even be ready to have restraints placed in them for another 2 weeks. How do they plan to control them? Okay. They don't. They aren't planning to fight back. They just want to bag as many as possible and run. Okay, I think that's an improvement. It's always nice to find something good in the first draft that we can use, huh? How are we getting, oh crap, he saw me! Okay, here's the original battle. Cold sweat broke on his face. She prepared herself, drawing her heat to her skin. Describe him! Her voice trembled. Pines found a broom and prepared to swing into the door. Unmarked heightened statue, enhanced the door was kicked off of its hinges. Pine had no strength. He was unenhanced. He swung his broom handle with all his might. But even though it struck the brute in the chin, it didn't even slow him. Now this is lost in this draft. The strength difference between a regular person and one of these things is so clearly illustrated in this moment. And that is a distinct loss here in the final draft that we're getting. And there's really not any way to fix it. It's like, no, these, you get the enhancement and you're kind of ridiculous. He was a foot taller than Pine, the knotted muscles showing that he'd received a hasty enchantment. The work was sloppy and ugly as well. The man also had enlarged eyes. Professional fighters never had those. The brute raised his spear, but portals had already struck. She pulled all the heat she could together into a lance of light, so intense it likely still carried warmth with it, and fired it straight into his eyes. Her goggles somewhat ruined the attack, turning what would have been permanent blindness into something more temporary. Pines didn't hesitate. He rushed forward, and unstoppering a small bladder, he splashed the contents, unrefined shaping fluid, over the man's face. At first the man didn't react, continuing to rub his eyes after the blinding light. Then he began howling in pain and stumbled, flailing wildly. Pine slipped out the door. Okay, so that's where we are there. Yeah, we also don't get to see the unrefined shaping fluid at all. I don't think that's as important. But seeing the actual strength difference is a significant loss. And there's really no moment in this chapter that I get to show it again. So, you know, all that ridiculous muscle they've had added to their body is not just a show. Okay. Helped her into the hazard suit. It was waxed cloth and leather, all black. This one had been built for a laborer, so it was stout, perfect for her. The arms and legs had simply been tied off not to get in the way. He poured water in the mask, doesn't work unless wet. Ooh, tied her golden hair into a bun. Yes, if you're going to put a mask on, that might help. Hold up. Okay, let's see. Tied is the wrong word. Into a bun. Into a quick bun. Pull the golden hair into a quick bun. There we go. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. It's good enough. The dark smokestone goggles restricted her vision, and it was hard to breathe through the mask, which would keep the miasma out. But worse, she worried how little of her own light would be able to pass through the smokestone. The noise outside the room was getting worse and closer to them. A good detail. Pines lifted her into her basket and then lifted it onto his back, checking and double-checking the straps. Oh, I gotta make sure he secured his own mask. Did you secure your own mask, sir? Yes, he did. Okay, good. Yep, he's very careful. Doesn't want the basket falling off his shoulders while he's running around. Okay. Pine ran down the hall despite his burden and the mask. Every door they passed had been kicked in. Most hadn't been looted yet. A few had, and a few had men who let their spears rest against walls while they filled sacks. None of them noticed, or more likely cared to notice, the two of them rushing past. Then he ducked into a storeroom full of broken and damaged items. He immediately moved to a shelf where several ropes were coiled. They all looked to be badly frayed. Are you sure these will support our weight? Of course. He sounded uncertain. He grabbed one, then put it back and grabbed another one. Then put that one on the floor. Look, these ropes were used for lifting heavy loads. They could probably support hundreds of people. He sounded like he was trying to convince himself. The ropes were thick, though. Now I'm just gonna... Gonna want to give him a little confidence here, but I don't see. No, I think she just kind of trusts him. She relies on him so much in her life. I think she just trusts him and his judgment. She can't relax in the situation, but she just trusts his judgment. I don't know. She let it go. Yeah. Yeah, this one's still plenty strong. I think in the second draft we have a more robust explanation that's completely unnecessary on the ropes. Just picked up the coiled rope. They had to use 2 hands to carry it. We're gonna have to pass through the breeding room to get upstairs. He was already jogging again. Portals rolled the beads around her mouth. She had gathered a great deal of warmth and was sweating profusely, but half of the light she made wouldn't be able to get through the dark goggles. Actually, much less than half would be able to get through. Pine stopped at a corner. Ahead they could hear breaking glass and free-line cries of pain. With difficulty, Portals drew a deep breath. Then she placed one of the beads between her molars and tried to crack it. She shattered it instead. She swallowed the burning shards, and the inferno slid down into her stomach, where it caused her considerable pain. "Go," she said. And Pine rounded the corner and started running. As he did, she drew the fire together and formed it into illusions. She created an army. 24 guards armed with crossbows and long knives appeared flanking them. Then, a dozen identical copies of Pine, complete with a coil of rope in his arms and her in a basket strapped to their backs. Yeah, no, that's the correct sentence. It just feels slightly weird, but yeah. And as many manticores as she could spin out. She did nothing to try to maintain them. She simply scattered her illusions in all directions. Some burst apart into sprays of light, others ran straight into walls. One even flew up into the air as if weightless. Instead, she focused spears of light so intense that they still carried heat with them. She fired these into the eyes of any who so much as glanced in their direction. Pine took the stairs 2 at a time and stumbled twice, but reached the 2nd floor and turned for the door. He stumbled twice. Unopposed, and turned for the door. Portal saw one of the men up to his armpit in a broken tank. A manticore somehow scrambled up the man's shoulder and prepared to leap. There was another spearman drawing back for the strike. Before he could impale the creature, she fired a spear of light into the man's eyes, throwing off his aim. And then they were through the doorway and out of the breeding chamber. Okay. Now this is a spot we're likely to find new details in the other drafts. So, the hole was clear. We're going for rope. They're burning books. Let's see. Finally found the storeroom he was looking for. It held various tools for hoisting heavy objects. I don't think I mentioned everything in that room was broken and in need of repair. I think that detail got lost. Storeroom full of broken and damaged items. Okay, no, it's there. It's there, it's there. Yeah. Everything in the room was damaged or in need of repair. Yep. Okay, she wants the beads. He gives her the beads because the events were in a very different order in this one. bit more uncertain in this draft. And I do kind of like that. There's a conversation I really want to include, and in every draft it's not there. But I'm just gonna have to put it in somewhere. So there's this concept in writing of the lie the hero believes, and in her case, you can tell from it that she feels like she's useless, and he also feels as if he's useless. Like she's doing like everything, blasting light and illusions and all this crap, and all he can do is run away. And so both of them kind of have this. Anyway, they're I don't want to get too much into all the different character archetypes and things, but yeah. Anyway, I want to get that conversation between the two of them in. If I can't get it into this chapter, then it'll have to be in some indeterminate future chapter that may or may not ever get written. Okay, I seem to want to destroy everything. Ah, this. I don't suppose you finally learned how to make shadows. Okay. That would be in the rope room. I'm gonna include this. I don't suppose you learned how to make you figured out how to make shadows. She slumped. No, light shaping is just a legend. She tried. Oh, how she tried. I can only make light, same as everyone else. From Bright Home. It's more than a legend, Pines insisted. He was already jogging again. But we'll get through. Okay, yeah, that was a good find. Okay, breeding chamber, proof access. The dark goggles were still a problem. Alright. Even as he moved, she focused the heat and began preparing to shape it. The noise of combat grew closer. He peeked his head, peeked around a corner. Ahead was the breeding chamber, now a mess of broken glass, with several soldiers hunting manticore among the broken tanks. Fluids those tanks once held were everywhere. She imagined she could smell the miasma. That had to be in her head. Miasma didn't have a smell. That's part of what made it so deadly. You know what? I think we should include this. Okay, let's see if there's anything else in the first draft we can steal. We're gonna need a distraction. Hein's voice brought back. There we go. Okay, where were we? Let's voice brought back the present danger. Even though he whispered, the fear was present in his voice. Oh, doggone it. I need that line too. Oh my gosh, that has to be in there. Even though he had whispered, the fear was present in his voice. At least 5 spears. That's just one she could see. Must have a normal eye. She didn't see him with shield eyes. He'd exploded from the... and then she swallowed broken pieces. Okay. You know, I don't think I have to explicitly say this. Holding in a scream. She drew the heat, light exploding out of her face and into the room. She shaped that light. I think we have a bit more dramatic illusions here. There we go. Good. He dashed towards the stairs. The figures blurred and broke apart into lights at random moments. Alright. By the time Pine reached the second floor, fires inside her have died and only the unbroken bead remains. Particularly ugly unmarked head. Apparently ignored the invasion, just fumbling around the ruins of a tank. Alright. Good. What's going on? Focused the whole of our attention. Making spears of light. Fired these at the eyes of anyone who so much as glanced in their direction. Ah, yes, of course. Okay. Now we have to go back to the second draft. Oh well. Thanks for dropping by, Christopher. Man. Yeah, get some rest. Oh, man. All right. All right, one sec. Okay. Okay. Secured his own mask and moved to the door. Cracked it open and... Oh, wait, no, we're... Alright, before even the fight... It wasn't a heavy door. It stood no chance against the intruder's kick. I like that sentence, but that brings us all the way back up here. Oh, I said we were going to be going up, down, up, down. Where's the door? There we go. I like that line. Perfect. All right. Split down the middle. Oh, they're hung by a single hinge at the bottom. I like that. hanging by a single remaining hinge at the bottom. Alright. Alright. Not to this creature. The intruder towered over them. Worn breeches. Oh look, this one had pants. In this draft. Grabbed the broom with one hand and snapped it. Portals formed all her heat into a lance, shot it into the thing's eyes. Okay. Shivering uncontrollably. Shaper fluid splash. Without any guidance, it set to work on the man's face. Pilot ran as best he could, but his load slowed him down considerably. Mm-hmm. Okay, then they run the move again, around the corner. There's breeding chamber. Let's see, a bunch of spearmen. Manticore tanks on the first floor had either been broken or opened. Goo pouring everywhere. Oh, she wished she could take off the mask. It would make it so much easier. She put on the beads. The molars cracked it. It goes all kabloomy. Same army of illusions. They blurred, split apart, and broke into cascades of colored light. They ran through each other and into solid objects. I'm taking that. And comparing it against... illusions blurred, split apart, or broke into cascades of light. They ran through each other and into solid objects. There we go. Very succinct. Very good description of it. Okay. Careful to include that detail. Dug on it. Focused the whole of her being into making spears of light so intense that even dampened by the smoke stone, they still must have carried heat with them. She fired these into the eyes of any who so much as glanced in their direction. What time? That's correct. She was drenched in sweat and cold. I think we already have that. I think I'm going to just take this sentence here. drenched in sweat and cold. The shattered bead was already gone, and she was gathering heat as fast as the uncracked bead could give it to her. Alright, there we go. And somehow, despite everything, she still finds the strength to go and rescue some random kitten that she doesn't know. Okay. We're just about through. Halfway, actually. Well, okay then. Alright. Pine was gasping for breath, then stopped to lean on the wall just around the corner. The stars were all gone now. We've already had that. Ahead, the doors were kicked in, just like on the ground floor. The head research office had smoke pouring out of it. 3 men emerged from that doorway. 2 were like the others they had seen, large men with enhanced muscles carrying spears. But the 3rd man was very different. He had no obvious physical enhancements, wore a silk robe, and had long silver hair. He was holding a sheaf of papers and had 2 books tucked under one arm, and he was wearing a mask. It was a small mask, just large enough to cover his nose and mouth, but it had larger intakes than the one she and Pine were wearing. He also had a birthmark. 3 lines and a hook. Portals couldn't place the style of birthmark, so she couldn't tell what magic he might wield. Well, well, some of you people are still alive? He shook his head. And why ever would you think to come up here and carrying a rope? Just what are you up to? His voice was even more silky than his robe. Pine straightened his posture. Portals moved the bead in her mouth between her molars. This time she shattered it on purpose. It was like an explosion of fire in her mouth, and she swallowed immediately. The spearmen were already edging closer. Pine tossed the rope down. How about I pull that? How about I pull off that mask and see who you are? Pine actually managed to make his voice threatening. The man laughed derisively and made a curt gesture. She'd already drawn more heat than she could throw. First Lance flew at the masked man, then the 2 spearmen. Despite the loss from the goggles, she was certain that these men would never see again. The spearmen screamed and grabbed their eyes. The masked man looked mildly surprised. She threw another lance of light at him. It dispersed, perhaps a half-foot before his face. Though the line had been so bright that he still had to shield his eyes. Of course, the obvious struck her. Of course the man was a nullifier. He was carrying an entire sheaf of papers, and the curse wasn't touching him. She began throwing out illusionary duplicates of Pine, who had already set her down and was drawing out a small bladder. It contained unrefined shaper fluid. He projected confidence, though she could still hear him breathing heavily. The masked man looked uncertain. Well... He took a step back and put a hand to his mask. Then his eyes fell on her and he laughed. Tell me, boy, are you just gonna leave your friend with my men here? He turned back to meet Pine's eyes. No, I do not believe you'll pursue me. Hey there, Buster. You're back. Pine said nothing. Well, I've already got everything I came for. So, toodaloo. And he ran. He ran far faster than any unenhanced person could, vanishing around a far corner after mere moments. Pine jumped to the side, narrowly dodging a tackle by one of the blinded men. He then kicked the spear away from the other, who was feeling around for it. He tossed the coil of rope over portals and lifted her, basket and all, and began running in the direction the man had fled. He then turned into a doorway halfway down the hall. Okay, now let's go over the other drafts. And then, from that point on, literally the rest of the script is all 100% departure from the first two drafts. So I don't know how much we're going to get out of them. Okay. Alright, Pines pulled up short. 3 of the invaders were just leaving a room. Smoke was pouring from the doorway behind them. 2 held spears and looked much like the others, but the third had a sheaf of papers tucked under one arm, and he had a birthmark on his forehead. 3 intersecting lines with a hook. Intersecting. Wait, did I describe his birthmark properly? Where was I? Oh, yes. She wasn't certain which guardian made birthmarks like that one, so she couldn't tell what magic he had. Pretty sure that's was wearing a mask, just enough to cover his nose and mouth. He had shielded eyes and looked no taller or stronger than an unmodified man. I took his shielded eyes away between drafts. But looks could be deceiving, and this man felt dangerous. I'm taking this line and putting this over here. Okay. This man felt dangerous. Pines bent low. Do you think she could blind them while he ran? Didn't you see the man's eyes? Pulling the masks off people like you. He managed to sound confident. Kill them. Let's see, crack the bead. Two spearmen took the full force of the light and dropped their spears, grabbing at their faces. Tell me, boy, how fast can you run carrying all that on your back? His eyes twinkled. Then he spun on his heels and dashed away. The blinded man attempted to tackle him. Okay, that was basically the same, except he had a twinkle in his eyes, and I like that. Okay, let's see. Moving on to the third draft. Or second draft. Right. This one had no dialogue, so this played out a little differently, right? Hasty muscle enhancement. Each carried a Titan spear. Carif. Dressed like a noble, wearing a silk suit. Well, I made it into a robe, but anyway. There's the mask. There's the document in the books. The bookmark. 3 lines and a hook. Okay, actually it pretty much plays out the same. I'm not seeing anything. Alright, yeah, pretty much identical. Alright, so from this point, each of the drafts actually dramatically departs from each other. So in the first draft, she was afraid that he was going to leave her behind when he couldn't carry her up the ladder. And her fears played heavily on her. Her anxieties. In the current draft, though, they actually enter the room and are in the room under her, looking while she's being hauled up. And I think that's a lot stronger. In fact, honestly, I'm not sure there's much of anything in these 2 drafts I can use in the remaining 4 pages, except maybe in the final scene. But it definitely needs some attention and some edits. At the very least, we gotta fix every instance of Pine's name. Let's fix that now. Okay. So this is what I wrote last night. Yeah, we're going to be going over this. Oops. Yeah, this is a 100% departure from the previous drafts. I use his name too often. Okay. Might be able to borrow a little bit from the others. I'll go over them and look at this last bit before I go to bed, but we've pretty much done, we've pretty much made the composite draft now. We're pretty much done with the composite draft. The first real draft. And we've ended up with I think 22 pages between the two chapters. Yeah. We've probably got in the ballpark of 100,000 words here, which, for reference, $120,000 words is the average length of a novel. Well, 70,000 to 120,000. In fact, young adult novels go as low as 50,000. So yeah, depending on how you want to count it, this is a fifth or a seventh of a novel. So, you know, we'll call it between 15 and 20% of a novel. Even though it's only episodes 1 and 2, and I intend to have a lot more if I decide to follow through with this whole thing. We still have the editing layers now. So we've got the first composite draft here. Now, what I have listed in the schedule for tomorrow is a reverse line edit. But there's actually a lot of different editing techniques we can apply. There's actually a lot of different editing techniques we might apply besides that. Not eager to do a reverse line edit. The reverse line edit should be the last one. There's no way I can do all my editing in one day. But then again, who knows? I've been pushing through this pretty fast. In a perfect world, on Saturday I would have I would be ready to release the final draft. And it would just be a reading of it. But I wouldn't expect it before Sunday. I'm going to dick around with this a little more before I go to bed, but yeah, we're most of the way done here. Hell, maybe I'll decide I need a week of tinkering. A week of just thinking about and tinkering this before I declare a final draft. I don't know. Anyway, until next time and every time, this is Hadriex signing off. Goodbye and good night.